Long ago, there lived a prince called Barumga. He would while away his days on hunts atop his favorite steed. One day, Prince Barumga was on a hunt, accompanied by many servants. When through the thicket, Prince Barumga sighted the most majestic deer. He ordered his retainers to circle the deer in order to trap it. Remember, I hold him towards whom the deer may run to be responsible for its escape or capture. At that moment, the majestic deer became startled and darted towards Prince Barumga. But Prince Barumga was swifter still and caught the deer by its antlers. "Oh, let me go, and I will grant you countless treasures," spoke the deer. Prince Barumga laughed. "I have many treasures, but not a talking deer. Then I will give you a ride on my back, such as no mortal man rode before." Prince Barumga agreed, and vaulted atop the back of the deer. The majestic deer began to beat its hooves into the ground, before launching into the air and across the tops of the trees. Prince Barumga held on to the majestic deer, and for the next several days and several nights, the deer transported the prince across desert and ocean, sighting pyramids and minarets. In the evening of the seventh day, the majestic deer took rest in a strange country. And once Prince Barumga alighted, the majestic deer vanished into thin air. The prince rubbed his eyes, but to no avail. The majestic deer had disappeared. Prince Barumga took to searching this new land, looking for house or footprint. But all seemed strange and unfamiliar. Until, after some time searching, a wee old man popped out from under a bush. "How did you get here? What are you looking for?" The prince explained that he had ridden a majestic deer, and it has left him in this strange land. "Fear not, for I am that majestic deer transformed, and you are now in Demon's Land. But do not be alarmed, for as you bested me, I will spare you. My name be Jastrel." At Jastrel's hut, he handed Prince Barumga a large ring with 100 keys. "Take this. These be the keys to my many palaces and gardens. Amuse yourself by visiting each through that very door, and mayhap somewhere you may find a treasure worth having." So each day, the prince used a different key and was transported to a new and wondrous place. One was filled with gold and treasures, and another filled with rich treats and cakes, until he tried the 100th key, where he found a disgusting hovel, full of weeds and disgusting insects and poisonous creatures. But in the distance, he caught a glimpse of a beautiful garden, more magnificent than any he had previously found. In the middle of this garden was a beautiful summer house, in which he found a golden bed. Prince Barumga, enchanted, took rest on the golden bed and fell asleep. Not long after his slumber, a fairy princess called Shopison was taking air. When she happened upon the prince asleep, the fairy princess took to ground in astonishment at the handsome prince. She stooped over the splendid prince and gave him a kiss. Prince Barumga awoke instantly and was bewitched by the most beautiful sight. "Dearest prince," cried the maiden, "how lonely I have been, stuck in this garden." The prince fell instantly in love with the fairy princess Shopison, that they both agreed to marry at that very moment. Nevertheless, Prince Barumga thought it best to consult his host the demon Jastrel. To the young man's delight, the demon not only gave his consent, but appeared greatly pleased, rubbing his hands. "Now you will remain with me and be so happy that you will never think of returning to your own country." Prince Barumber and the fairy Princess Shapasand were married and lived contently in their garden paradise. But alas, after some time, Prince Barumber began to thinking longingly for his mother and father, and for his favorite horse and hound, on the hunts he would take. So that he began refusing food and began to grow pale and thin. The demon Jastrel, who visited the prince and the fairy princess from time to time, took pity on the prince, as he was a kind-hearted demon, and drew much pleasure from his guest. At last, the demon asked what the matter was. Prince Barumber confessed that his heart longed to see his mother and father once again, and asked for leave of his demon host to take his wife with him too. "Dear Prince, the world has changed since your arrival in Demon's Land. But take this hair, and burn it should you ever need my assistance." The demon Jastrel made a regretful farewell, and in an instant, Prince Barumber and Fairy Princess Shapasand were transported to his native city. But alas, as the good-natured demon had foretold, his father and mother were both dead, and a usurper sat upon the throne and put a price upon the prince's head. Luckily, none recognized the prince, as so much time had passed, save for his former huntsman. Now old recognized the prince, and granted him shelter in the garret of his house, which he shared with his blind mother. One day, the prince and his huntsman took to the country to seek out a good hunt for dinner. The fairy Princess Shapasand took the opportunity to wash her silken hair. She opened the window to the garret to allow the breeze to dry her hair, when the chief constable, walking by, was so overcome by the princess's beauty, he tripped and fell over into a gutter. The chief constable called for his guards and began beating on the door of the huntsman's house. The fairy Princess Shapasand, greatly distressed for the guards at the door, took the form of a dove and flew out the window as the guards broke through the door. The huntsman's blind mother, unable to comprehend the ruckus, sat in her chair as the guards rushed to the garret. The princess, in dove form, flew in through the door and whispered in the old crone's ear, "I go to my father's house in the Emerald Mountain." Once the chief constable could find no one in the house, save for the blind old woman, they departed. In the evening, when Prince Barumber and the huntsman returned, great was his grief at finding his wife gone. He threw himself onto the floor and refused any food or drink. The blind old crone happened that she heard a voice in the air, that she would go to her father's palace in the Emerald Mountain. Prince Barumber was somewhat comforted. Alas, he remembered he was gifted a hair from the demon if ever he was in need. He threw the hair into the fire, and instantly the demon Jastrel appeared in the huntsman's lodge. "Show me the way to the Emerald Mountain." The demon shook his head sorrowfully and said, "You would never reach it alive, my son. Forget all that has passed and begin a new life." "I have but one life," answered the faithful prince, and that is gone. If I lose my dearest princess, as I must die, let me die seeking her." The demon, touched by the prince's loyalty for one of his own country, transported him back to Demon's Land, whereupon bestowed on the prince a magic wand. "Go now and follow this path until you reach the hut of my elder brother, Nanak Chand, where you will meet many dangers, day and night. But if you keep this wand, you will come to no harm." Prince Baramgar set out upon his long journey across Demon's Land, encountering many ghouls and dangerous creatures in his path, but who all stayed their distance from the prince at the very sight of his magic wand, until he came upon the hut of the demon Nanak Chand, who began to stir and awoke at the sound of someone daring to approach his hut. When the demon Nanak Chand arose and demanded to know who was foolish enough to approach his hut, Prince Baramgar, magic wand outstretched, fearing the sight of the demon, spoke that he was sent by his brother, Jastro, and that he was searching for the Emerald Mountain. The demon, satisfied at the mention of his herald, spoke, "Be guided by me, forget this pursuit. You would be dead thus far if not for the magic wand my brother gifted you." The prince, firmness in his resolve, spoke, "I have but one life, and that is gone if I lose my dearest Shapasand." The demon, touched at the mention of the name of the fairy princess, "If you must, then take this magic powder and continue on the path until you reach the house of my eldest brother, Sofed. Rub the magic powder onto your eyes, and what you wish for will be far, and what you wish near will be near." Prince Baramgar took the demon's gift and continued on his path through Demon's Land until he came upon a barren house. Inside the house, another demon stirred at the approaching footsteps and began savoring its meal to come. That was until Prince Baramgar showed his wand and stopped the demon Sofed in his tracks. "What is your business here, my little morsel?" Prince Baramgar explained he was guided by his brothers, Jastral and Nanak Chand, and that he was searching for the Emerald Mountain. The demon Sofed shook his head. "Be guided by me, my son. Forget all that has passed. You will never reach the mountain alive." Still the faithful prince exclaimed, "I have but one life, and that is gone if I lose my dearest Princess Shapasand." Thus the great demon nodded. "You are a brave lad, and I must do my best for you. Take this hat, and whenever you wear it, you will become invisible, and continue on the path, and you will reach the Emerald Mountain. But I warn you, it is an enchanted mountain. The further you travel up the mountain, the taller it grows." The prince explained, "I have this magic powder." "I see, then you may well succeed in your journey. Use the magic powder to reach the top of the mountain, and use the hat to enter the Emerald City." The prince parted ways from the demon and continued on his path until he reached the foot of the glittering Emerald Mountain. Prince Baramgar took the magic powder and rubbed it into his eyes. And behold, what he desired, what once was afar, now was right in front of him, and he was in the Emerald City. He placed the hat on his head and was now free to traverse the city, searching for his dearest Shapasand. The Emerald City looked as if it had been hewed out of a single piece of rock, and was dazzling to behold. But the inhabitants were all goblins, chewing on bits of bone and tendon. Prince Barumgar traversed the streets until he reached the center. There he was dwarfed by a giant emerald tower. He searched high and low, but couldn't find a way inside, until he noticed a goblin walk towards the tower with a tray of sugared lokum resting on its head. Prince Barumgar followed the goblin until it reached the side of the emerald tower. A partition of wall magically disappeared, and the goblin carrying the tray of sweets entered. The prince, seizing his opportunity, leapt in behind the goblin. Once inside the emerald tower, he followed the goblin until it arrived at a locked door. After tentatively unlocking the door with a key, the goblin let himself in, quietly followed in by the prince, still hidden by his magic hat, and was astonished to find his Princess Shapasand on the floor of her cell weeping. The goblin left the tray of sweets on the ground and walked back out the cell. Prince Barumgar still stood motionless inside the cell, waited for the goblin to leave, before sitting down beside the fairy princess, who was still sobbing on the floor. When the prince began to eat the sweet lokum from the tray, the fairy Princess Shapasand, looking up, could see the sweet lokum slowly disappearing. "Who eats in the same dish as me?" she cried out faintly. Prince Barumgar, no longer able to resist, removed his magical hat and held her in his arms, her tears changing to a radiant smile. She then explained that she had returned to her father. After long last, after she became trapped in the demon's garden. And her father, the fairy king, locked her up in the cell, for he doted on her dearly, and couldn't bear her getting lost again. But she had urged her father, the fairy king, that she was wedded to a prince. But he said that if he be worthy of the fairest princess in all of Demon's Land, he would find a way to her. And if he succeeded, he would not only give his blessing to their matrimony, he would also make him the heir to his kingdom. Prince Barumgar and Princess Shapasand held each other all night until the following morning. When the goblin servant returned, he was astonished to see Prince Barumgar also sat in the cell. That they were both summoned immediately before the fairy king, who announced cause for great celebration. Now her husband found his way to her, and as promised, he made him his heir. And the prince and princess lived happily ever after.